acted upon what you could do versus what your
What they could do.
classmates could do. At Wenonah High School, you were there for 4 years. Tell me, what do you remember about Wenonah High School?
I remember being very shy, and I had a sister who preceded me, and I was sort of in her shadow. Cassandra, that's right. And everybody, she was very popular. She had this beautiful singing voice and this very open personality. And I was the opposite. I was a bookworm. And I traveled to strange, faraway places in my books. But I wasn't very open with people at that point. And people were always making the comparison between the two of us. Are you sure you're Cassandra's sister? I said, well, yeah.
Well, in 1963, you were a sophomore at Wenonah, and this was a time of the demonstrations.
Right.
You got involved in the demonstrations. How did you get involved in the demonstrations?
I started watching the movement, if you will, on TV. I'd watch the news with my family. And once I understood what they meant by the civil rights movement, it made sense to me. And I had always felt that there was something wrong between the races, and I wasn't really sure what that something was. But I didn't like the way the black people in my community would respond when a white bill collector would come around.
How would they respond?
They were normally, very proud, aggressive men, but then all of a sudden they would become rather subservient in their demeanor when a white man came around. And that bothered me, and I watched it.
Were there discussions of that at all between you and others that were your age, other children? Did you ever discuss that?
No, because I don't know that they noticed.
You mean the men?
No, my peers,
your peers.
peers. I don't think they really noticed it, and as a result, they were interested, for example, in being outside and playing all the little games that kids normally play, and I played some too. Don't get me wrong, but I preferred the company of books to the company of the kids.
So were you a loner?
Pretty much.
So that's where you more or less was educating yourself through the utilization of the books rather than being all consumed by the educational process.
Exactly. I didn't realize this at the time, but yes.
Okay, your involvement in the movement, how did that happen? I know that you participated in demonstrations, for instance.
My mother went to a mass meeting and I wanted to go. And she took me, and sitting in the audience and listening to Dr. King touched on that mysterious something inside me. And I knew that they were addressing the race question, and it had never really been addressed before. And I thought, okay, finally, let me kind of investigate this and see where this will lead. And back then, they separated the mass meetings. They had one for the adults, and they had one around the corner for the youth. And I started going to the youth meetings and just became totally engrossed.
What Explain to me what was the youth meeting like? What happened in that meeting?
A lot of singing and rallying. They discussed the critical issues, the same issues that were being discussed in the larger mass meeting with the adults, but they tailored it to fit the temperament of the students. And again, I just became totally absorbed and fell absolutely in love with Reverend James Bevel.
Mm-hmm. Was Bevel one of those that sort of instructed the youth at that time?
Yes.
Were there others that you remember who was just as actively involved as Bevel?
I remember, let's see, there were always people coming in and out. I remember Carlton Reese, he was there, playing away at the piano and leading us through song. And what's his name? I'm drawing a blank now, I think, because you're asking me.
But there were other individuals who were very actively involved
and who
in that process.
Who were there, on a weekly basis,
right.
who were kind of on the front line, the foot soldiers.
Right. Tommy Wren was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
There were others also, but in that first week of May in 1963 is when the students actually got, really consumed with the movement, and they sort of thrust ahead and saved the movement in effect. Mm-hmm. Were you a part of that particular
wave? Yes.
That wave of students? At other schools, particularly in schools that were closer to the downtown area on the perimeter, like Parker and Ullman, there were workers that would go to those schools and talk with students to try to get them to come and join the movement. Did that happen at Wenonah at all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but now there were a number of us who already were involved in the movement, again, through the mass meetings. Mm-hmm. We knew they were coming to our school because they told us. Okay. And they said, we want you to walk out and go with us downtown because we're trying to make a statement. We want to send a message. Mm-hmm. And, I heard them, and it didn't really sink into me what they were actually saying until I saw some of the guys walking up and down the hallways, calling the students to come out
inside the school.
Oh yes, they were walking up and down the hallways, beckoning. And I looked out there and I saw them and I said, oh, okay, well, now's the time.
And you responded to that
immediately.
call? Immediately. Were there others that responded as well?
Yes, there were a number of us who just got up, walked out of class, and we walked.
You walked from Wenonah?
From Wenonah High School to downtown Birmingham to Kelly Ingram Park, yes.
That's about 7-8 mile walk.
That's right. We walked and we sang and chanted, and in retrospect, if I think about it now, and if I were to really stop and think about it, I say, wow, that's a long way. But yes. Back then we were young. I was 13, 14 years old, and I walked long distances anyway. I mean, I would walk from Ishkuda to Cairo Church of Christ to revival meetings,
which is probably 3-4 miles itself.
Right. So I was used. I mean, back then we all walked a lot.
Right. Do you remember when you walked that distance? Did you walk it more than once, or was it just this particular day? Because at other times, I know students, they would leave school the first day, and then rather than going to school the other days, they would leave home and go to the church or downtown to the movement. Is that the way that it happened with you all?
I only and I think this would be true for most of the other students as well, we only made that long walk that one time, okay? Because again, we were trying to make that statement. So we walked from Wenonah to downtown Birmingham, and that was the same day that I got arrested. And when I say that I hadn't really given any thought to it prior to that, you know, I'm very serious because I had not asked my parents' permission. I really did not know that I would end up in jail that day. I thought I would walk downtown and march and picket and rally, you know, the same kinds of things that I had done many times in the past, and then go home.
Be home by